As Steve correctly said at the beginning, JDA candidates stood in the elections in 2005 on a principle of GST is the wrong way forward, and we still believe that. Now, we've heard from others saying that GST was presented as the only way forward, and it's described by Ray as the least worst option. And it certainly was presented as that. However, the figures that came out discussing how regressive it was were, quite frankly, nonsense, because the only figures that were produced were figures based on expenditure, and you can work it out for yourself. If you are relatively poor, the likelihood is you spend all of your income. If you are relatively wealthy, you spend some of your income and you save some, i.e. proportionately you're not hit as badly as someone who spends all of their income. So regressive it certainly is, and the presentation that was given to people, supposedly to inform them and consult with them, was actually completely misleading. If I was in the House, I would be able to say, no, I wouldn't be able to say, it's a lie. But the presentation certainly was misleading. It was a lie. It's clearly made up. It's based on expenditure and not on income. And if you look at income, it certainly is regressive. Second factor that went in, that I was concentrating on today, I'm examining today, all day, the legislation that's concerned with income support. And lo and behold, there's a figure put in there to protect the least well-off. Now, the first stab at the figure required to protect the least well-off that came out of Oxera was a figure of between 11 and 14 million pounds. Now, if you're going to raise 45 million pounds through your GST, it's fairly obvious that if you've got to spend a third of that protecting the least well-off, it isn't worth doing. Second stab was had at it when Crown agents came along, and they came up with a figure of between 3 and 5 million pounds to protect the least well-off. And that looks a bit more, okay, that's of the order of 10% of your income going back out again to protect the least well-off, but possibly doable. When the final calculations were done, the figure came out at approximately £2 million. Again, I will look at that and say, well, hang on. If somebody can have an estimate early on that is an order of magnitude different to what is finally brought out, one has to question not just the first figure, but also the final figure. How can you manage to be so different? So the question mark I have around that is that currently they're saying £2.7 million to protect the least well-off. That's the figure we need. I have a question mark around that already. So the figures don't necessarily tell the full picture. But let's stay on figures for the moment. Now, what we try to do is raise £45 million in order to fill a part of a black hole. And the financial service industry has already been exempted from GST, but is prepared to voluntarily pay a sum of between 10 and 50 million pounds in order that it should be exempt. All well and good, but they can afford that 15 million pounds. Do the sums, 45 million less, let's say 15 million, comes down to 30 million. We have to raise 30 million pounds. Today, not 3 years ago when we first started thinking about it, what's our economy doing? Well, whoopee, the sun's shining. It's sunshine, it's happy days. We've found already £30 million additional revenue already in the box from 2006. We're booming. £30 million we need, £30 million just found. Is that a one-off? Is it a windfall? No, that's an increase in economic activity in the island. That's the FSI, our major industry, with its profit levels going up by a quarter. Well, that's not going to disappear tomorrow. That should be, if it's sustainable, and the Economic Development Minister tells us that it is, sustainable growth, then that should be here to stay. So that £30 million will be here next year, and the year after, and the year after, and then some. So, with glorious hindsight, if we were to put ourselves back 3 years, when we first started looking at it, now we've got a very, very different picture.